So welcome to Team DataFam Tableau User Group meeting number 8. This tug is more about the presenter rather than the audience. So we meet at different times because that's when the presenter is available, which is why we're meeting at this time today. So the tug presentations are for anybody who wants to present, just get in touch. Obviously, all the meetings are live. The recordings are on YouTube and in the podcast as well. And there'll be a lot of sessions from TC25 over the next few months, including one of these today. If you want to present on the tug at all, please email me at team.datafam@gmail.com. But today we have Scott presenting Dashboard, Standard, Simplified, Define, Document and Deliver, which is obviously what he presented at TC25 as well, talking about best practice for standardizing dashboards for consistency and clarity, development, reducing rework, all these good things that we may not actually think about. So I'll pass it over to you, Scott, and we can get on with the presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Let me share my screen here. Let me bring up my presentation. There we go. All right, we'll go ahead and get it kicked off here. All right, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate you all attending a session today on Dashboard Simplified. I am very excited to chat with you about a topic today that is crucial for both dashboard designers and dashboard consumers. For dashboard designers, well-defined standards serve as a framework for dashboards that are visually appealing, intuitive, functional, and user-friendly. And for dashboard consumers, they ensure a consistent and intuitive user experience, leading to well-informed decision-making. So before we dive in, I just want to say thank you to you, the DataFam. This has been the most inspiring and welcoming community I've ever had the privilege of sharing my expertise with and collaborate with. And I'm very honored today to chat with you about a very important topic of dashboard standards. So a little bit about myself. My name is Scott Eaton. I'm a data visualization manager at JP Morgan. I manage the US-based reporting and automation team in credit card data and analytics. I have been with Chase almost 12 years. I have been in the data visualization space for 19 years and have used Tableau for 13 of those. I am a 2024 Tableau User Group Ambassador, excuse me, as well as co-lead 2 Tableau user groups, the DataFam Career Pathmakers Group and the Central Ohio Tableau User Group. On a personal note, I've been married for more than 25 years to my wonderful wife, Angela. My favorite sports teams, my favorite sport is American football, with my favorite teams being the Cleveland Browns and the 2024 national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm an avid solo player gamer, and my favorite video game franchise is Assassin's Creed and Horizon. And my favorite TV franchise is Star Trek, with my favorite series in that franchise being Deep Space Nine. And that does tie into what I do in my career from a storytelling aspect. We know that storytelling is an aspect of what we do in dashboard development. And when I started watching Star Trek in my late teens, that really started fostering my love of storytelling, and specifically Deep Space Nine, which was the first series to have an overarching story arc span multiple seasons. That allowed me to be emotionally invested in the characters and just drawn in and engrossed into the universe. And that really started fostering my love of storytelling and has continued all the way through the present iterations. They've continued to follow that same format. And that fostering of my storytelling has allowed me to have the privilege of the career that I've been able to have over the last almost 20 years. So, objectives for today. What should you hope to get out of today's session? Well, first, I hope you will learn some actionable techniques on how to define, document, and deliver standards for your dashboards to make sure that they provide clarity and that they are consistent for all of your users. Next, I hope that you gain some insight into how simplifying the development process through the use of standards will help you reduce rework and potential production issues that may come down the road. And then finally, I hope you gain an understanding of how establishing standards can help you minimize risks and implement controls to help make sure that your data stays accurate for your users. So the agenda for today is, first, we're going to talk about why should you have dashboard standards? What is the importance of having standards? Next, then we'll talk about the components you should be defining in your standards. We'll first talk at what are the high-level components, and then we'll do a deeper dive into each one of those for some specific things you should be taking a look at when you're defining your standards. Next, once you've defined them, we'll talk about how you document those standards. And then once you've defined and documented them, finally, we'll talk about how do you deliver your dashboard standards to your intended audience. What's the implementation plan, and what methods should you use? So that being said, first, why should you have dashboard standards? Well, in order to understand the importance of having dashboard standards, so you can then start defining what the components should be, you need to have a well-defined definition of what a dashboard is. And my definition comes from Stephen Few, a leading expert in the field of data visualization, from his book, Information Dashboard Design. And he states, dashboards are a visual display of the most important information needed to achieve one or more objectives, consolidated and arranged on a single screen so the information can be monitored at a glance. This definition is the foundation for my career almost 20 years ago, and has been the basis for everything I've done, from dashboard development to implementing strategy around dashboard projects. So whether it's this definition or another definition that you've come across and have started to kind of use as your basis, as long as you're consistent with that definition, you should be set up for success to start developing your own dashboard standards. So why should you have dashboard standards? Well, first, dashboard standards promote consistency to make sure that you have uniformity across all your dashboards in the consumption for your users. Next, they promote accuracy to make sure you're reducing any data errors that could potentially be there, and you want to improve the reliability of your data so that way your users can rely on your data as being a trusted data source in your dashboards. Next, standards promote clarity to enhance the user's understanding and give them well-informed decision-making for the business problems they are trying to solve for. Excuse me. And finally, dashboard standards promote efficiency to help you streamline maintenance and development processes to help you avoid potential rework that could come down the line from not using standards. All right, now that we've discussed the importance of why dashboard standards are important, let's now talk about the components we should be defining. And again, we'll first talk the high-level components you should be thinking about, and then after that, we'll dive into some components again into each one of those high-level ones. So first thing you want to take a look at is putting standards around the data model, specifically with data source, physical layer, presentation layer. You definitely want to have well-defined standards around that to have an optimal flow for your users so they know how to process and consume your data. Next, you want to have standards around the layout and design. This is going to provide your dashboards to make sure they're accessible and user-friendly. And having standards around dashboard formatting, workbook formatting, and chart formatting, make sure that all the visual elements in your dashboard are are cohesive and easily consumable. And then next, you want to have standards around color and visualization. So having standards around color palettes, around the chart types, make sure that all the visual elements in your dashboard have a visual, intuitive language to them. Next, you want to have standards on security, specifically around license methods, access approvers, requests. You want to make sure that your sensitive data is only being used by authorized users. So having standards around the security will make sure that happens and help you avoid any potential data breaches that could occur. Next, you want to have standards around code reviews. Things like the frequency of the code reviews, who's approving the code, what the documentation is. You want to have standards wrapped around that as a controls, because you want to make sure your dashboards are functional, they're of high quality, and that you're catching all the bugs in the process and not letting any of those get forward to a production state. Then finally, you want to have standards around both the technical documentation you're putting out there and maybe some internal documentation to Tableau itself. So you want to standardize again on the template and the tool you want to use to help, whether it's you or somebody else, with reverse engineering of the dashboard now or in the future. Okay, so now that we've talked today on the high level components, let's dive into some individual items into each one of those components. First component we're going to look at is the data model. And you want to have some standards around the data source, specifically around things like data structures, especially when dealing with large data sets. We all know the more data that flows into a dashboard, normally the slower the performance is going to be. So you definitely want to have standards around how your data is structured to make sure that your data is being handled in the most efficient way possible. Next, you want to have standards around things like calculations. We all know that some calculations are more performant than others, so you do want to have standards around what calculations should be implemented in the back end and what calculations should be implemented on the front end Tableau side. Next, you want to have some standards around things like the physical layer. So location, is the data model, going to exist in the Tableau data source pane? Are you going to use a tool like Tableau Prep or some other ETL tool to output a hyperfile to a centralized location? Again, that adds to performance, whether it's in the tool or outside of the tool. So you want to make sure you have standards around that. You also want to make sure you're thinking about granularity of data. Do you want it at a high granularity? Do you want it at a lower granularity? We know the lower the granularity, the more data that flows in, and again, adds to performance. So make sure you have some standards wrapped around those things, and make sure you call out the specific scenarios if you have to have different levels of granularity or different locations where the data model is going to reside. Next, under data model, you want to have standards around things like the data layer. So we all know it's definitely crucial to have a good metadata dictionary that you can easily access, on a centralized location to find out things like database names, table columns, things like that. But what I'm referring to here is more inside the tool, and specifically, maybe you want to have some standards around things like column renaming. I have seen many workbooks that have either had names for columns that I did not understand, or they were using the default database names with underscores and things. And unless you're a data engineer, you're not going to understand what those column names mean. So you want to have some standards around renaming of columns to make sure they're put in common business terms that can be understood. Next, you also want to have standards around things like field definitions. Having them in a metadata dictionary is good, but for users who may not have access to that, or designers who do not have access to that, having it in the workbook itself is going to provide a quick and easy way to do that. So you can easily do that by just going into the data source pane, highlighting the specific field, and using the comment feature to put in a quick and easy field definition for that field. All right, next component we're going to look at is layout and design. So first thing with the dashboard and workbook formatting, you want to have standards around consistent shading, resolution, font style, size, and type, because you want to make sure that your dashboards are easily viewable across multiple devices, and you want to make sure that your dashboards are accessible. You also want to have some good standards around things like tooltips, just to make sure that all your secondary information is still easily consumable without overwhelming the main content. And then finally, you want to have standards around things like band numbers to just make sure that your users are being drawn into the most important metrics on the page when they first come in, and then all the other mechanisms you used for formatting can be followed to give them all that supplementary information. Next item under layout and design is chart formatting. You want to have standards around things like divider lines, access rulers and ticks, data labels, because your users are coming in there, they're going to be doing analysis, and you want to make that analysis as easy as possible for them. So having those standards will help you guide them in their analysis and make their job that much easier to do. All right, next up, color and visualization. First thing, color palettes. Well-defined standards is a crucial piece for designer, is crucial and significantly affects how a user interprets and perceives the data that they're looking at. A well-defined color palette is accessible and enhances readability, and a well-defined color palette will evoke the emotion in line with the tone of the dashboard and will fit with the purpose of the dashboard that you're looking at. You also want to have standards around types. You want to make sure you're reducing the cognitive load for your users. So calling out things like charts for trends, bar charts for comparisons, line charts for trends, scatter plots for correlations. That's going to help guide your users, like I mentioned before, in their analysis they're doing. And having standard chart types is in line with best practices and does minimize the risk of data misinterpretation. All right, next up, we're looking at security. First thing you want to wrap some standards around is your access methods. So are you using AD groups to have users access your dashboard? Are you using row level security within the dashboard? Are you using some other security method? You definitely want to have standards around that, just to make sure that only authorized users are accessing your sensitive data and you avoid any of those potential data breaches. Having standards around the access method will also allow for usage auditing, specifically around metrics like user behavior and data utilization. Next, you want to have some standards around who's approving your access to the data. So you should have some standards around how those should be determined, what are the guidelines they should be following when approving access, and if there is any unauthorized access, what is the process they need to follow to remove those unauthorized users. And you need to do that in line with any data governance policy you have to make sure that that the control you're putting in place for this is in line with that. Next, you want to have some standards around access requests. You do not want there to be any ambiguity around how your users should be accessing your data. Should they talk to this person or that person? Should they go to this system or that system? You don't want them to have to figure out how they get access to your dashboard. It should be well defined for them. Having standards around access requests is going to allow them timely access to your dashboard, and also make sure that all the access requests that come in get the same amount of scrutiny put to them by the access approvers. All right, next up, code reviews. You want to have some standards around the timing of the code reviews. Are you doing it at the end of a development process? Or are you going to do it a few times through the process? Whatever you decide, you want to make sure that you're promoting quality of your dashboard, you're promoting functionality, and you're also making sure that the security is set up accurately, and that this is going to also provide an opportunity for continuous check for whoever the approvers are in the process, to make sure that things are in line with what you guys believe to be best coding standards. Next, you want to have standards around who those code approvers should be. Is it going to be peers of the developers? Is it going to be developer leads? Again, you want to define that This is going to promote maintainability and scalability of your dashboards to make sure a standard template is being used and all the bugs are being caught in the dashboard in a timely manner and addressed. So that way it does not get into production and avoid some unnecessary production support or potential rework that needs to get done. And finally, you also want to have standards around approval documentation. This is going to allow you to have accountability and traceability for your control and your approval process. So is it just going to be an email sign off? Is it going to be what I believe should be the best approach, which is a dashboard checklist, to where you go in, you have things defined like what you should be checking off under data model, under design, under controls, and your code approvers will be the ones signing off on that document. So you want to make sure, whatever the approach is, you have standards around what that documentation is going to look like. Then finally, the actual technical documentation. So this again is different than the code review documentation. So you want to have standards around the template you're using for your technical documentation, or maybe standards also around the internal documentation you're doing. This is going to provide consistency, understand the logic of the dashboard and the structure of the dashboard, and also help with reverse engineering, whether it's you that maybe is doing enhancements later and you need to just get a refresher on the dashboard, or for somebody who's picking up the dashboard, whether it's temporarily or permanently, you want to give them a good mechanism to be able to understand how the dashboard is working. So having a standard template means, okay, what sections are you going to include in there? Things like calculated fields, filters, summary statistics, dashboard to worksheet mappings, things like that, tables and fields being used. So standardizing what sections you want, and also how detailed you want those sections to be, and what order do you want those sections to be in, is again going to create some consistency to help in the understanding of it. Then next, you want to standardize on the tool you're going to use. Are you going to do it manually by hand and through a tool like Word? Are you going to use an automated tool like RapidDocs, which is a tool that I found out there, which automates technical documentation piece of it just by uploading the workbook and reading the XML. So you need to define for you what's going to work better from a tool standpoint, and then what file format do you want to put it out in? Do you want to have it in Excel, PDF, PowerPoint, HTML? Again, standardizing on the tool will then help you kind of standardize the template you want to create based on the tool and the file format that you're wanting to get it in. All right, now that we've talked about the components you should be defining, how do you go about now documenting your dashboard standards for consumption by your user base? So first, the importance of having dashboard standard documentation. You want to have it as a reference for designers, developers, and anybody else that wants to look at it and get a quick understanding of what's the consistent pieces of your dashboard and how to be building it. They're going to facilitate onboarding and training of your designers. So whether they are designers coming from a different team that has a different set of standards, or there are designers who are coming to your team who have never done dashboard development before, you want to make sure that you have documentation in place to facilitate that ease of onboarding and training and give them that reference. Some tips for generating your documentation: you want to make sure you're using clear and concise language. You don't want to say, okay, use bar charts, line charts, and scatter plots. You want to say, use bar charts for comparisons, use line charts for trends, use scatter plots for correlations. You don't want to say, okay, use black font and use big font types. You want to actually call out, use 12-point font for this, use 16-point font for that. You want to be as detailed as you possibly can to make it as easy as possible to do. And then finally, in any part of your standards where you're calling out, okay, here's what you need to do to create a hidden filter panel. Here's what you need to do to create a a worksheet that you can float on a page to put shading behind a chart with rounded corners. You want to include very detailed instructions and visual aids so they can see step by step how it's done, and they can also see how it's done as well. So make sure you're including those in your documentation as well. All right, now that we've defined our components and we've documented them, how do we go about implementing these standards and delivering them to the intended audience? Well, for your implementation plan, you need to decide on what the training sessions are going to look like how you're going to, are you going to do the training all at once? Are you going to take periodic training sessions to train on the different parts of it? Because you want to create that feedback loop, because chances are the first version you come up with is not going to be the final version. So you want to be able to foster an environment that you get that feedback to kind of get your standards into that you can start using, to where you can monitor adherence to those standards and address any deviations that come from that. You want to standardize on the tool and resources, so standardize on the file format. And what I mean by that is you may be creating one version for executives, you may be creating another version for the actual analysts and designers. So kind of figure out what file formats you want to do that in. For example, I've created a Word document for the designers, developers that's eventually going to go into a Confluence page. I've created a Tableau storyboard for executive leadership that takes those standards up to a high level, just so they can get an understanding of what the standards are being applied, and it's not overwhelming for them. So again, standardize on the file format that you want to use to disseminate the information, and make sure you're utilizing collaboration platforms, things like Confluence, SharePoint, or other collaboration platforms that are out there. So whatever works best for you, just make sure you kind of have a standard platform that you can disseminate all that information. All right, in summary, first we talked about just the importance of dashboard standards for consistency, clarity, efficiency, and accuracy. And then we talked through the steps to define, document, and deliver those standards. And specifically when it comes to defining the standards, you want to put standards around things like data model, layout and design, color, security, and documentation. So you want to make sure you're calling out standards around those high-level components, as well as standards around the individual components of those as well that we talked through. And then finally, with the implementation, you want to make sure you're standardizing on the file formats and the collaboration platforms. You make sure you're conducting training sessions and creating those feedback loops, as well as monitoring. By doing that, you're then going to be monitoring the adherence to the standards and addressing any deviations. So I would just like to say thank you to everybody. Hope this has been an informative session for you and is giving you some ideas on how to start creating your own dashboard standards for your area. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to help in any way I can, and I will open it up to questions.
Yeah, so we've got a few questions. Kathy's question was, what was the tool mentioned for workbook review that looks at the Tableau XML? I thought you said it was Rapid Docs.
Yeah, it's a tool called Rapid Docs, and it's not so much for dashboard review, but it's for automated documentation of your dashboards. It reads the XML, and it's very customizable. It will do a lot of the things that I mentioned. When you're thinking about a template, it allows you to pick which section you want to include in your document, allows you to pick the order, what components of some of these sections you want in there, and it will document. It only reads the metadata of your workbook by the XML, but it will be able to pull out information like your tables and fields being used. It'll be able to pull out all the calculated fields and list out, okay, here's the data type, here's the name, here's the code. Is it in a folder? To be able to pick out things like parameters, sets, groups. It'll give you summary stats of, okay, how many worksheets are being dashboard page, what are the filters being used, parameters being used, all that. So it provides very thorough documentation. I used to do my process. My process was 100% manual before, and I came across a dashboard to where I spent 6 months on a dashboard. I was doing documentation, and there were 150 calculated fields in this dashboard, and it took me just a week alone to copy and paste those in my manual template. At that time, it's like I was thinking there's got to be a better way to do this. So I did some research, found this tool, and it took a 100% manual process and automated 85 to 90% of it. So it cut out quite a bit of the manual work I had to do. Now there is a cost to it, so there's a licensing cost. So I would recommend anybody that's interested or wants to get more information, please let me know. But you can go out to rapiddocs.com. That's rapiddocs.com. And you can get all the information, licensing information, and just some high level stuff around what it does.
Awesome. And Sam's put a link in the chat as well if people just want to click on that. Thanks, Sam. Zaid said, if I'm using Figma, is it okay to have the color and typography systems there?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? Sorry.
Yep. It might be my microphone as well. If they're using Figma to design dashboard backgrounds, I guess, is it okay to have color and typography systems there? So basically have the definitions in Figma rather than in Tableau.
It's whatever works best for you and whatever you define. The examples I gave are just examples that I followed or other people have followed, but whatever template you define as to how you want to document these standards is entirely up to you. What I found worked best for me is defining that stuff. It used to be always in a Word document before, a very kind of comprehensive, cohesive Word document. But I've learned over the course of my time that you have to kind of create stuff for executives to consume, and then you have to create stuff for maybe a better format for the designers, developers to use that doesn't maybe read like an exhaustive book. So that's why I'm taking my Word document and putting it in a Confluence page that's going to be sectioned off by different tabs. But again, it's whatever works best for you. I'm not going to say one format is better than the other. I just know the formats that have worked best for me.
Yeah, it's that thing of find something that works well for you and implement that properly. Yep.
Yep.
And Paul's question was, do you have a W3C accessibility level, e.g. AA or AAA, is targeted? So AA for W3C.
Yeah, this is where it can be a little tricky. As part of the standards document I've built, we have a branding template. We have a JPMC template that we use. And it is a mix of blue and green, which is not necessarily accessible. I've always tried to use a colorblind friendly palette when I've created my dashboards. But again, I have to go with what's being dictated to me. So some of the accessibility stuff may not always be there from a color standpoint, but I've still tried to use like best practices around chart types, font sizes, font types, things like that. I use web-friendly fonts and web-friendly font sizes to be in line with what those standards are. But again, because of just I do have a restriction on the color palette I can use because of branding.
Yep, that makes sense. And the same thing, it's just like do what's best for your organization and what works best in your environment. Awesome, that was great. So here's Scott's contacts if you need them. It was interesting when you said you like Star Trek, but your link is Jedi Grandmaster, but that's cool.
Yeah, I do like Star Wars too. I'm both into Star Wars and Star Trek, but I'm a bigger Star Trek fan than I am Star Wars. So I've been watching Star Trek a lot longer.
Yeah, there's a lot more of it to watch as well.
Yep.
Awesome, thank you. And this will be in the recording as well if people need those links, or just let me know. We've had the Q&As we've gone through, which is cool. So now it's time for fast. So obviously 5 quick questions, quick answers. No need to think about the answer. There's some tricky questions in here as well. So the first question, what's the most satisfying part of using Tableau for you?
I just love the visual aspect of it and being able to create some visually appealing stuff. And I think for me, I think it resonates with me more just because I'm a visually impaired person. So being able to thrive in a very visual field, and I've had some people give me some great compliments to where they would not know that I'm a visually impaired person based on some of the business dashboards I put together. But just being able to thrive in a very visual field with me having a visual impairment has been rewarding.
That's pretty cool. Do you enjoy the data cleaning part, or do you find it frustrating?
I do enjoy it to an extent, especially if I'm doing it for the first time, and trying to I'm all about optimization and automation, so doing things as efficiently as possible. So if I'm creating something from scratch the first time and figuring out how to do this or do that, I love the problem solving aspect of it, but I do find it frustrating at times, especially when you think you're getting a clean data source and you're trying to fit it into the dashboard you've built, and then within the dashboard you're seeing all these errors that are popping up, or just misinformation or misanalyses that are being done that you have to go back and then kind of do this data cleanup that should be connected or should be done at the source instead of putting a band-aid on it.
Yep. I think Sharina picked up, I'd picked up as well on your sigh halfway through that. It's just like, well, that's the challenge of data cleaning a lot. Okay, number 3, what would your dream Tableau feature be, no matter how wild?
Oh man, this might be a tough one because I've switched to the strategy side of things, so I haven't done a lot of dashboard development over the last couple of years.
That's cool. Self-documentation, maybe.
Yeah, you know what? I think that would be in line with this. I know Tableau has some internal features to where you can do there's like worksheet documentation and things like that. But I guess I wish it would do some more thorough documentation to where you didn't have to use a tool like RapidDocs to get that. So I don't know what specific features that would be, but I wish they would improve their documentation features that are currently there.
Yep, that's cool. And which Tableau task do you secretly dread? Or maybe there's none. That's okay.
Well, I won't say there's no task in Tableau I secretly dread, but even though I'm a proponent of documentation, passionate about it, I hate to do it. But it is a necessary evil. It's good for auditing purposes. It's good for reverse engineering and things like. And even though there's an automated piece of it, I don't dread it so much as what I used to. But there's still manual pieces I do have to put in there. So, and I know nobody likes to do documentation, but it's just a necessary evil that we all have to do. So I do dread it when I have to do it, but it's just not as dreadful as what it used to be.
Yep, that's cool. And the last one, what's the one thing in Tableau you wish was easier? Sort of the opposite of one before. Documentation may be the answer as well.
I wish dealing with containers in Tableau was easier, especially when you need to move containers around. I know in the web authoring version of Tableau desktop, you can look at the layout pane and you can move the containers around within the structure that's there. You can't do that in Tableau desktop with a pane because then you have to do a lot of putting of placeholders with blank tiles or placeholders with other containers just to move the containers to where you want it in there. So I wish just working with containers was a lot easier in Tableau.
Yep, definitely. I think there's a lot of people on your side with that as well. Awesome. Okay, thanks for that. That was 5. So the next tug meeting is Kevin Wee taught his Tableau 25, his TC 25 talk, infographically speaking, designing dashboards for impact. So again, on a similar theme to what Scott had today, but this is, I think Kevin's going to be talking about Figma and actually designing things in Figma, but obviously covering a lot of the principles we talked about today as well. Obviously one meeting, but a whole heap of different time zones and times around the world, depending on where you live in the world, obviously. And you can catch this whole heap of other stuff on the YouTube channel. So youtube.com/@teamdatafam. That's what YouTube does. So there's this tug recording. A lot of other tugs put their recordings up there as well. There's also a Spotify and an Apple podcast if you would like to listen to the audio version while you're driving or out gardening or whatever. You can't actually watch YouTube, and you can listen to the podcast as well. So you can see that even this session, it's a lot of good information that you can just hear, and you don't actually need to watch the slides. And that's where the podcast really helps with that as well. And if you want to present, or if you've got any feedback or just anything to help with, just email me at team.datafam@gmail.com. But thank you, Scott, for your time. It's awesome to see that presentation. It's a lot better than trying to get time at TC25 to see that as well. And a lot more people can enjoy the presentation that you had today.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
And I don't know how many people are here. There's 17 people. So if you've got a little bit of time, I'll go back and make these people presenters so they can actually talk. If they want to, unmute themselves. Yep. I've just got to get to the right screen and do the right thing. So as I make each of you a presenter, you can just unmute on your side if you want to, and then you can chat with Scott. I don't know if there's a better way to do this, but I have to do it all individually. There you go. Everyone's a presenter. Everyone can unmute, and then no one unmutes themselves.
Presentation as always, Scott. Glad to support you, and I'll leave the floor for everyone else since I get to chat with you a little bit more regularly.
Yes, thank you, Sharina. Appreciate it. Anybody else? I'm happy to chat about anything Tableau, not just presentation today. So I'm happy to chat about anything.
It's where everyone becomes shy and doesn't turn on their microphones.
Okay, Scott, I have a question for you. Is there
okay
within like you were talking about in Tableau desktop, you go to the worksheet and you can describe it and it gets you a nice little summarization. Do you know of any possible way to automate that creation of that?
I don't specifically, not working for Tableau, beyond just what they have you do, which is just copy it and put it into a Word document out of there. I highly recommend Rapid Docs. I've used it quite a few times. I've gotten it approved. It's an approved software within the bank. It's a very thorough tool, and you can include as much or as little as you want in the documentation. And it's like I said, it's very customizable. It's the base work of it, especially when it outputs it into a Word document. It's built in a one continuous table format, and there's a lot of tables that go in there, especially when it comes to like calculated fields and things. But you can customize what columns you want in those tables and things like that. So I highly recommend it if you're able to either afford the license yourself or get work to pay for the license for you. It does have a significant cost, especially for a lifetime license, which is like $1,000 for a lifetime license. And then there's like a recurring $200 yearly kind of support and upgrade maintenance cost. But they do have monthly options and just by year options as well.
Yeah, I had downloaded it and was using it, and
Okay.
alternately, I'm like, we're trying to get that for each worksheet and then feed that information into a AI model to generate generic descriptions for dashboards
Okay.
and worksheets. That was my I'm like, that's the ultimate goal that we want to do, because I'm like, talking about documentation, people have different documentation styles, and standardizing it, and people have different descriptive writing styles as well too for describing your content. So we're just trying to use a chat bot to do it for us.
What I would recommend is this, and this worked for me when I first started using the tool. I found a lot of stuff that I thought would improve the tool from an enhancement standpoint. So I would constantly put in support tickets, and they've implemented every one of those features I suggested to them. One of those being like a table of contents that now gets generated when it generates the document, and being able to pick and choose the columns in the table. So if you're a licensed user of the tool, I would recommend anything you think would be better in the tool that might be a possibility that they could enhance. I would just put in a ticket for it, and see what they can do. Normally, they've been able to implement anything I put in within like a couple weeks. So I would recommend kind of taking that approach to see if they can maybe do something along that lines.
Okay. Thank you.
Or on the other side is hope that the API that they demoed at TC25 that does you can automate anything you can do in Designer. When that gets released at some point in the future, is then you can automate it that way. But it sounds like RapidDocs can do that now. So
yeah, and I know there's other people have created other like tools out there like APIs to do it, but from what I've seen, whether it's Alteryx or Python code or whatever, it's still using the base function of it reading the XML from the workbook and then spitting out the documentation in a consumable format.
awesome. If there's no one else that wants to unmute and ask questions, then we can wrap it up.
Hi. I'm going to ask one that's kind of out of left field of regular Tableau discussion. If there's anything you could ever do in the history of Tableau, from when you started using it to now, what would you change?
Oh man, there's so much that's changed with Tableau. I started using Tableau in version 7, 13 years ago, and I've forgotten more of what's changed than probably that's having there, because I know there used to be things I did back in the day where I had to do like elaborate code fixes to get working, especially when it came to things like parameters. Wow. I guess maybe the only thing I would have changed is I know some of the things that and I've heard this from a lot of people. I know some of the top rated features they have put off implementing for like years and years and years. So I don't know what their process is behind the scenes, or if it's just not technically feasible. But things like parameters, I wish would have come a lot sooner to kind of have saved a lot of coding that needed to be done to work around a lot of that. And if there's one thing I could eliminate from Tableau, I would eliminate level of detail calc.
I had a party when level of detail came out because I was so happy, and I hate them every day ever since. So
I've been using Tableau a while, and I very rarely use them. And when I have, I still don't understand a lot of them. And from what I've learned over my career is anything you can do in a table calc, you can almost, or I'm sorry, in a level of detail calc, you can almost always do in a table calc.
Or do it in the SQL prep leading into the workbook.
Yeah.
Okay. I think there aren't use cases, but I try to avoid the use cases where I have to use them. Just from that standpoint. So I would say if that's the one thing, if I could eliminate from Tableau, I would get rid of table calcs, or sorry, level of detail.
LODs. Yeah. Thank you.
And I was much the same way. I remember, I forget what year it was. Was it 2018 or so when LODs were announced? And we're sitting there going, but why do you need this new feature? Because every time, before LODs, when you had that data challenge, there was always a way to fix it. And, oh, there's this new thing in Tableau. I'm like, but we don't need that. And it's, in the right situation, LODs are really cool, but it's always difficult to get that syntax right. A lot of people use fixed, and not a lot of people I've seen use include and exclude at all.
Yeah, I've 95% of the time I've used fixed. I've used like include and exclude maybe once a piece.
Yeah.
And the times I used them, I still didn't understand how they were working.
Yeah.
I just know they worked. I got the right answer, so I just used them.
And I saw there was someone on Reddit the other day, and I sort of think that I was sort of interested when you were talking about code reviews, because I sort of go, the less code in Tableau, the better. And someone had this really big calculated field with lots of LODs all over. And I said, so the number one thing, remove all the LODs, build your sheet properly, and then see if you've still got a problem.
Yeah.
A lot of people just sort of like build fixed LODs because they don't know what to do. Like, let Tableau do the work for you. It's going to be easy.
Yeah. That's where knowing the order of operations is key.
Exactly. Yes. Awesome. Anyone else? If you're just going to sit there on mute, then there's no conversation and we can finish the meeting. We might just finish the meeting. Zayed's not going to talk because it's almost 2 a.m. for him, so that's fair.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Again, Scott, thank you for your time. Awesome to see that presentation, and good to chat to you afterwards as well.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate your time, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye. See ya.